In Louisville, where I live, the current demand for local food exceeds the current supply by over $300 million. If we don't move fast to push our local food economy beyond the scale of farmers markets and CSAs, I'm worried we may not have a local food economy left. At the same time, the biggest challenge facing communities nationwide is a lack of jobs more than a lack of food. What if we could address both of these challenges with one solution? An urban business park housing lots of companies in the local food economy, bringing hundreds of jobs and a healthy flow of food into and out of one site every day. Welcome to the idea of a food port. I'm an entrepreneur, and I started a nonprofit called Seed Capital Kentucky to support the development of our local food economy and models that could be used around the country. Rather than fixed opinions about food, I bring the idea that if we keep trying to get this right, we will succeed. But we have to keep learning from our lessons. And here's what I've learned so far. The demand for local food is very great. Just after I started this work, our mayor, Greg Fisher, asked us just how big this local food thing could really be. So we conducted a large-scale study to quantify the demand for local food among individuals and commercial buyers in our community. That demand, it turned out, across all neighborhoods and income levels and companies of all sizes was 2 to 3 times the current supply. Meeting that demand among institutional buyers alone could have an $800 million economic benefit on our community as those dollars flowed through the value chain. So why was the marketplace not moving faster to help that supply meet the demand? There are a lot of answers to that question, but one of them lies in this bottleneck. Too many transactions in the local food economy remain small scale, one-to-one, and expensive. Farmers are still having to take on too many jobs and too much risk just to get a part of their crop sold. And buyers, especially restaurants and institutional buyers, are also having to work too hard to get the local food they want. Like people in a lot of communities around the country, I felt that one essential way to loosen this bottleneck was going to be a food hub, which led to my next lesson: food hubs don't always work. In Louisville, we already had a company that met the USDA's definition of a food hub. It was a farmer-founded, locally owned distributor of local food called Grasshoppers Distribution. There was nothing not to love about this company or its mission, except its ongoing financial losses. I put together a group of people that recapitalized the company. We supported a new leader. We raised additional funds from the state, from philanthropists, from national organizations like Wholesome Wave. And over the course of a few years, we tried every good idea we could think of to push this company over the hump to break even. At the end of the day, this for-profit company proved to be a lot better at attracting donors than new customers, and its board made the difficult decision to close its doors. There was general dismay at what was viewed as a nationally important food hub couldn't make it. And yet, we weren't alone. In 2013, the Wallace Center showed us that almost half of all food hubs were looking like unsustainable businesses. And more recently, California's Community Alliance with Family Farmers, based on 15 years of experience in the field, issued a report with discouraging conclusions about food hubs. We've been working with a team of grad students at Harvard who also helped us identify another conflict embodied in many food hubs. If the goal of these projects is to increase public engagement with a more transparent food system, well, they aren't always succeeding at that goal either. This is not to criticize food hubs or to deny that many of them are succeeding, but just to say that we have to keep learning from our lessons. Our success with fundraising for Grasshoppers did teach me my next lesson, which is that access to capital is not the problem. As our demand study showed, there are a lot of dollars trying to get their way into the local food economy. Kiva, the website that's crowdsourced over $500 million of loans to entrepreneurs in the developing world, recently launched a platform to do the same thing in the US, called Kiva Zip. We began endorsing loans to farmers and value-added processors on that Kiva Zip platform last year. And the money came in faster than we expected. Ag-related loans are among the most popular on Kiva Zip, and farmers have the highest repayment rate. Kentuckian Mike Lewis is a veteran farmer, that is a veteran and a farmer, who borrowed $10,000 on Kiva Zip, crowdsourced from over 250 lenders across the US and from countries like Taiwan and Bahrain to buy additional dairy equipment. Mike and his brother farm on land that was purchased for them to lease by Illinois-based Iroquois Valley Farms, a B corporation that represents the increasing availability of capital from microfinance, impact investing, venture capital, and traditional lending for farmers and value-added processors. Watching transactions like these taught me that we may need to be spending more time looking for business models outside local food systems, for ideas about how to grow local food systems. We may also need to be building infrastructure more than new businesses. In Louisville, many of the companies I encountered in the local food economy, especially the processors, already had cash flow and employees. They were already buying from farmers and selling to consumers, but they didn't have infrastructure. They were each having to build it all by themselves. Remember that bottleneck? And yet, building infrastructure to support economic growth and job creation is something our cities already know how to do. Louisville dramatically expanded its airport to serve UPS. They call it Worldport. Then they built a giant business park to house companies that ship goods via UPS and the river. They call it Riverport. And hundreds of companies in the logistics industry moved into our region as a result. What if we applied that idea to the local food industry? Based on the success of projects like these, Seed Capital Kentucky is now applying that concept to the idea of a food port, developed as an urban business park housing multiple companies all across the food chain. A 24-acre site located just 2 miles from City Hall, housing companies engaged in the production of food, education, distribution, processing, storage, retail, and waste recycling. A stack of tenants that actually replicates the fertility and sustainability of a healthy farm. These companies get more productive because they're located near each other. And as they become more productive, they can buy more crops from regional farmers who can monetize more of what they grow by delivering it all to one place. And it turns out that the location of that place really matters. Because my fifth and my most recent lesson is that when you apply economic development tools to food, they become community development tools too. A food port on this scale doesn't just loosen the bottleneck between supply and demand. It can completely rebuild the neighborhoods around it. When you add hundreds of jobs to a neighborhood where 1 out of 3 adults is currently unemployed and 1 out of 4 takes public transportation or walks to work or the supermarket, you create economic opportunity, but you don't just create economic opportunity, you completely reshape those neighborhoods as marketplaces themselves. Suddenly, retail becomes viable, and with it, opportunities for neighbors to start and own businesses themselves. That, in turn, attracts others to a neighborhood they aren't currently visiting or shopping in today. 200 years ago, the producer of food and the consumer of it were the same person, or at least they were close neighbors. Between producer and consumer, we have introduced a long string of strangers, companies we never see with employees we don't know. And yet we are hungry to rebuild a sense of community between farmers and ourselves. And we need to rebuild community with many of our own neighbors. What if we could use the dollars and jobs that flow through the local food economy to feed that hunger and meet that need? And what if an urban business park, a food port, could make it happen. Imagine the lessons we could learn then. Thank you.